After doing a deep dive on how the Invincible TV show writes women, I realized that the show also does a phenomenal job at writing male characters. And I think part of why that is because the show challenges how we believe masculinity should be portrayed in media. It would be incredibly easy for the showrunners to just go down the typical male power fantasy and create characters that live up to the ideal image of a man. But throughout the first 3 seasons, we've seen a variety of male characters, and a lot of them provide some kind of subtle commentary on certain aspects of masculinity. We see the image of a perfect man make flawed choices. We see masculine characters frequently put in emasculating chivalry. The way the show portrays its male characters makes you really think about what masculinity means and how it's been portrayed in media for decades. Of course, masculinity is a very loose term as it is a social construct that changes depending on culture, so I'm going to be pulling up examples mostly from American media, with some other examples thrown in here and there. This goes without saying, but this video contains spoilers for the entire Invincible TV show. And without further ado, here's how Invincible doesn't just portray masculinity, but how it deconstructs it. And who better to start off a video like this than the man himself, Omni-Man. Omni-Man is the perfect character. I'm not saying that he's without flaw, but he's the caricature of the ideal man. Physically, he's muscular and well built, he has great hair and facial hair, he's also tall, and even his face shape is incredibly angular, which is commonly associated with masculinity. He's also really good at his job, whether it be protecting humanity as a superhero or as a best-selling author as his secret identity, Nolan Grayson. And we know that traditionally, the man of the house takes the role of breadwinner in the nuclear family. Thus, the ideal man would be competent and or ambitious, so they would be able to provide. Speaking of, he's a family man too, having a great relationship with his wife Debbie and with his son Mark. And to top it all off, his superhero persona, Omni-Man, literally means all man, as in the perfect image of a man that all men should strive to be like. In that regard, he's very much like Superman from DC. So he encapsulates a lot of what society expects men to be. And there's a lot to unpack with Omni-Man, but I want to focus on this one aspect of his characterization. He twists the breadwinner's dilemma. Like I said earlier, the male has historically taken the role of breadwinner in the household, and a problem that breadwinners face is balancing work with family life. Sometimes the breadwinner has to work incredibly hard, staying overtime or working on the weekends, sacrificing precious family time, and this can cause strain within the family dynamic, with the other members of the family feeling like they're not as important to the breadwinner as his job. Thus, balancing duty and family is a dilemma that a lot of men have had to face for years. But here's the thing, popular media has glorified men who choose duty over family and has done so for centuries. In the literary universe of Game of Thrones, we see different orders composed exclusively of men, like the Kingsguard, the Maesters, and the Night's Watch. In universe, being selected for the Kingsguard or volunteering to be a Maester or member of the Watch is seen as a huge honor, as they all have a purpose of serving the realm. But joining these factions would also mean sacrificing familial connection, and as such any inheritance or marital obligations. Thus, your duty as a servant of the realm comes first. We also see this in superhero media all the time. We glorify these male paragons of good who uphold their superhero responsibility over their own families. We get this with Superman, particularly in 1998's Superman for All Seasons. In this beloved iteration of the character, we see how happy Clark Kent is in Smallville, with his parents and his high school sweetheart. But at the end of it all, he goes back to Metropolis and chooses to be Superman and save as many people as he can. And we got this in Tired Life with his daughter. This is something that dates all the way back to even Greek myth. Hector from the Iliad is a tragic character because he's a Trojan with a deep love for his wife and son, but as a prince of Troy, he's bound by duty to defend his home, even when their family is at their wits' end and pleading him to stay with them. Ultimately though, he chooses to fulfill his duty as a Trojan and dies at the hands of Achilles. And for this valiant act of self-sacrifice, Hector of Troy was immortalized as one of the 9 worthies in medieval literature. These are 9 male characters that are celebrated as paragons of chivalry and examples of ideal men, and this was all because he chose his duty over his own personal happiness. And in season 1, Omni-Man chooses duty over family in every sense of the word. We see him murder the Guardians of the Globe whom he has worked with and known for years. They were people who knew him. They were his friends. He kills them in cold blood for the sake of his mission. He calls his wife Debbie a pet and nearly kills his son Mark, all in the name of his mission to the Viltrum Empire. But he realized he loves them both dearly and ultimately can't bring himself to conquer the planet. And in between seasons 1 and 2, we know that Omni-Man felt lost and without purpose. He can't fully conquer Earth because that would mean killing his family, which he cannot bring himself to do. But he also can't come back to Earth and make up for the atrocities that he's committed. We got to see a purposeless and empty Nolan, a man without family or duty. But apparently this isn't the first time Nolan has gone through this. In season 1, episode 4, if he's to be believed, he went through a similar feeling of loss and grief when his parents died, claiming that they were the only family he knew. And in season 2, we see him make the opposite choice, choosing family over his duty. He has Mark protect Andressa and Oliver against the Viltrumite soldiers invading Thraxa, and he fights back against his own people. We see that he's given new purpose when he's part of a family once more, with Andressa and the child that would be Oliver. We see how protective he is of both of his children. We see how much he cares for them when they're in danger, and we see how much happier he is with a family. Nolan is a family man through and through, and that's a valid way for a man to live his life. But technically, he is shirking his duties to the Viltrum Empire. By upholding his love for his family over his own people, we're seeing this image of an ideal man choose his family over his duty, and it's glorified and presented as the better option. And the revelation in season 3 episode 4 adds a whole nother level to this. We now know that there are fewer than 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites left in the universe. His people, powerful as they are going extinct. His mission isn't just in the name of territorial expansion. It could very well mean the survival of his people. So while we may see Nolan choosing his family, we also know that he's not fulfilling his duty to a dying breed. It's such a fantastic way of subverting the common duty versus family dilemma. And this to me is like the show saying, maybe we should move on from this idea that men should prioritize their duty over the people that they love. But what's interesting to me is that we still see people reject this idea, that we still expect men to uphold their duty above anything else. And I say this because there's a certain male character that fans absolutely despise this season, and part of why that is because he chose family over duty. Now stay with me because I'm talking about the Immortal. Interestingly, the Immortal is presented as another ideal man character. He's pretty much a budget Viltrumite, muscular, strong, capable of flight and age as well, with the added fact that he can seemingly keep coming back to life after being killed. But such a power isn't always a good thing. Yes, the Immortal has watched and will continue to watch everyone he's ever loved around him die. But that's not the only thing, because Immortal has a superhero responsibility as well. And it's rare that a superhero gets to live until old age, and in a lot of cases, the only time we see heroes leave the super life is when they die. We got this with MCU's Tony Stark in Endgame, the Fox Universe's Wolverine in Logan, and mainline continuity's Barry Allen in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and more. With their deaths, these characters got to rest, but every time he comes back, it's just a matter of time until his next death, and then the cycle repeats ad infinitum. The only way for him to leave the superhero life is for him to choose to do it. And note that this man has served for centuries, and has undoubtedly saved countless lives throughout his seemingly endless one. In my opinion, this man has earned his retirement and time to rest thousands of times over. It's just we might have come to expect a character like him to honor his duties as a superhero because that's what's been glorified by media. But it's heavily implied that the world just doesn't need him anymore. Mark has far surpassed him in ability and he's clearly not strong enough to take on Viltrumites. So I think it's valid for this character to just want to take a step back and for once in his never-ending life, choose himself and his own happiness over the greater good. Regardless of how you may feel about Immortal or Omni-Man, we see how important family is to both of these characters, as we also see an example of a powerful male character that doesn't have one. And I'm talking about Conquest. Conquest is a physically superior Viltrumite. His physique is a lot more muscular and he's tall, much taller than Mark and even Omni-Man. He's also more rugged with a scar across his face, a missing eye, and a prosthetic arm. Ruggedness, muscularity, and height are all things typically associated with masculinity. We also see that he's incredibly competent as a Viltrumite, apparently having conquered multiple worlds, but what really makes Conquest's character is that he has no known connection, whether it be familial or friendly. And this is of course the reason he gives his "I'm so lonely" monologue. It's ironic. He's competent, strong, and long-lived in a society that values these traits, and yet he has no friendly connection within the entire Viltrum Empire. And there's a commentary here on male loneliness. Vulnerability doesn't come naturally to Viltrumites. Nolan isn't exactly the most open person on the show, especially not to people outside of his family, and Conquest only tells Mark his backstory as he's about to kill him. And in real life, men typically have trouble building meaningful connections, not just with women, but with other people in general. It's why a lot of men have trouble making friendships outside of second places like school and work. Like Viltrumites, men aren't socialized to be open and vulnerable with their feelings the same way that women are. In fact, there's an ongoing male loneliness epidemic where an alarming number of men just don't have a meaningful connection with anyone, friends, family, or romantic partners that they may not even have. It's ironic that men are socialized to be strong, independent, and show little emotion. And on the other hand, the men who exhibit the opposite, like physical weakness, dependence on others, and emotional openness, are typically seen as less masculine. Society has pushed these ideas onto men for generations, and now men are paying the price for it because they don't know how to be vulnerable and establish connections with other people. And it also means a lot that we're getting this speech from a character who's portrayed as incredibly old. We're shown that this hyper-masculine, powerful man is lonely and unhappy with his life, despite being part of a society that values the traits he exhibits, like men in real life. Yes, you're masculine and muscular and macho and living up to, possibly even surpassing people's expectation of what a man should be. But do you feel you are? You're the picture of the ideal man, but are you happy? This commentary is something I love about Conquest's character. And Omni-Man, Immortal, and Conquest are three examples that would fit the image of the ideal man, but what about characters that don't? Or at least, not yet. Well, Invincible has a lot of those, and one of the best examples is the show's namesake. I wouldn't say that Mark isn't a masculine character. In fact, I think his defining character trait, which is his indomitable spirit, is very much masculine. We glorify characters that persevere, like Captain America and Rocky Balboa, while maligning those who don't, like the Immortal. And we see Mark put in situations that would typically feel emasculating for men. We see society celebrate men who frequently claim victory, display competence without needing to rely on others, or independent and baby-faced. But looks aren't everything, as we'll see from this next character. Cecil is one of the least physically imposing characters in the show. He's thin, which implies he doesn't exactly have any muscle on him like Mark or Nolan. He's old, but unlike Viltrumites, humans don't age well and we physically deteriorate as we grow older, and he's also balding, which is a common source of male insecurity. But Cecil is probably one of the last characters that can be defined by his physical stature, as he is probably one of the most powerful humans we've seen on the show. Not because of his physical strength or presence of a superpower, but because of connections and the resources at his disposal. He has vast amounts of funding, access to crazy technology and weaponry, and has teams upon teams of scientists and soldiers backing him up. And he's always looking to add to his arsenal, whether it be through recruiting new superheroes or through more morally dubious means. This on its own is a subversion of the ideal male archetype. There's this expectation that strength should be acquired through honorable and ethical means, and his willingness to cross ethical boundaries is also what sets him apart from the image of the ideal man. But what's interesting is that it's portrayed in a rather positive light. Cecil doesn't value his ideals, he values the mission, he values the lives of humanity, and he's willing to go to lengths that most men won't, all in the name of saving lives. Darkwing 2 is a murderer and D.A. Sinclair is a psychopath, but he sees their talent and uses them to save people. And that's part of what makes Cecil such a well-written character. He's a virtuous man who has to resort to dubious means. And this has caused him to clash with other characters in the show like Mark and even his own right-hand man, Donald Ferguson. And when he finds out about the truth behind his body, we see him struggle to accept that he's an android. And this is natural as it's a lot to take in. Remember the ship of Theseus paradox. If you replace every single part of a ship one by one over time, is the resulting ship still the same ship as the original? So after numerous deaths and revivals, Donald wonders if he's still the same person. Is he still a man, even if he's mostly machine? And we see another character by machinery doesn't make you less of a man. Both Rick and Donald go through some heroics during the Invincible War, with Donald on the field rather than being with Cecil on the sidelines, and Rick saving William from falling debris. Donald has been able to save lives time and time again through his valiant acts of self-sacrifice. And speaking of self-sacrifice, let's talk about Rex. Rex feels like your typical wisecracking badass superhero character. He's a one-liner machine who fights well and just won't shut up. A bit like Deadpool, but also MCU Star-Lord, and maybe a little bit of Sokka from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And casual audiences love these characters. They're funny, heroic, and easily likable. But when we first meet Rex, we see the negative aspects of this character trope highlighted. He blows stuff up and likes to run his mouth, but he's also arrogant, cowardly, and self-centered. He cheats on Eve and lies to Kate to do it, and he's disrespectful to authority even when those authority figures are in the right, and honestly to everyone around him in general. In Season 1, you can look at Rex and think that he is everything wrong with men, and he takes 3 full seasons to develop into someone better. This toxic man isn't a permanent label, and that through working on yourself, you can grow into something better. I believe he has the best character arc that we've seen so far in the show, so go watch my video on that if you haven't already, because frankly I've already talked about him at length. And I think the show has a lot more to say about masculinity through other characters like Oliver, Rudy, and Alan the Alien, but I believe the show hasn't played all of its cards yet, so I'll let the showrunners tell the story as we go. If you want to talk about comic spoilers in the comments, I won't stop you, but please use a spoiler tag out of courtesy for show-only watchers. I think Invincible has done a very good job at breaking down masculinity and showing men who aren't just your typical macho man. These characters, and a lot more, challenge how men are typically portrayed in media, and I believe that even when we're 3 seasons in, we're just getting started. And if you liked the video, comment down your thoughts below, and leave a like if you haven't already. Subscribe for more deep dives on Invincible and other shows and movies, and I'll see you in the next video.